Hey, hello, my peeps on YouTube. Charles and I here. Excited? Are you guys ready? All right, let's go. How do I do this? So, folks, today's topic is trying to figure out, are you good enough, in Power BI? Well, to be a consultant, to be a professional, it applies to both. I mean, we tend to cover things more from a consultant angle, but yeah, really, it's the same thing. So yeah, good to have everybody on. Do say hello to us. And I see a lot of folks on. Positive Minds from Paris. Branislav is here. We were chatting earlier. Jose is here from Portland, Oregon. Robin from Houston, Texas. Michael has a question. Noreen is here from Bellingham, Washington. Hello, Noreen, fellow Washingtonian. Sherry is here. Sherry, always good to see you. So folks, yeah. So let me put up the topic list that I have, and it's gonna go right on our faces, I think. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So again, right, the big topic is, are we good enough in Power BI? So we're gonna start off with the first thing that I get, which is that actually let me move this, just see if I can move it up. Sorry guys, still tinkering with it. There we go. Okay, that's gonna make it a little bit better. There we go. So the first thing that I get is, Avi, I'm not sure I can do it because I'm not a techie. I don't have an IT background or a database or a data scientist. I don't have any of that. And the next thing that I get is that, well, cool, maybe I can still work with that, but do I have enough Power BI skills? And if we resolve that, then the next question is, oh, Avi, but what about the rest of the stuff? Don't have to learn all of that. Powerflow Automate. And of course, last one, and this one is deeper, way deeper, this fear of disappointing your client. It's like, man, Avi, I don't want to let them down. Boy, right? I mean, I don't want to get in something that I can't swim out of, right? So that's a topic, and I think we had earlier from one in the audience. Who was that? Somebody suggested that we bring up certifications. So we're certainly going to talk about that too. So let's dive right in, and we're gonna start off with the topic that, hey, how can I really make it work if I don't have a background in tech, IT, database, data science? A few more hellos here. Odair from India, Ray from UK, Dark Satari, cool certification. Marcin is here, Manish is here. Hello folks, good to have you on. So let's dive in, and let's start from the point, if you don't have IT tech background. So I'm going to share a story, and then we're going to hear from Charles. So I call myself the accidental entrepreneur. And for me, it was a series of accidents, some very painful ones. And I said, whoa, I guess I'm an independent consultant, solopreneur, freelancer, entrepreneur. I'm still working on that, the final name there, founder, CEO, whatever, right? So that was my journey. But before that, I worked 15 plus years in corporate America, and I would read these magazines, Entrepreneur, Inc. I loved reading them, but for me, it was more like voyeurism. I was like, oh, wow, look at these people. Like, what can they do? They're amazing. And I never, ever envisioned that I would be in the path, because that was not me. That was not my identity. And why was that? And again, it doesn't have to be that way. But of course, the worst prison that we can be in is the one we create for ourselves. And sometimes it has a link to our past. Sometimes it doesn't. In my case, it was somewhat linked to my past. So in India, for those culturally, they have these almost two kind of levels. You're either in a service family or you're in a business family. And yeah, I mean, the whole family is like a business family. Their kids would inherit the business and it would go on. And if you were in service, and earlier in my dad's time, they were pretty much government jobs, and you worked at the government, got a salary, and that's what you did all of your life. And I saw that divide right from the get-go. I mean, right at the school, you could tell which kids were business kids, which kids were coming from service families. Because the business kids, they didn't care about studies. They were like, you know what? I'm just going to inherit my dad's business anyway. So they would goof off, bunk classes, watch movies, flirt with girls. And us guys, service family guys. Well, we hunkered down, man. We kept our heads down, you know, stayed away from girls, attended all the classes, and by the way, the staying away from girls didn't work for a long time, but the rest of the stuff worked, I guess. And yeah, and we focused on our studies because we were going to be like dads. I was going to take some kind of a entrance government placement exam just like my dad did, and I was going to go there. Now, of course, times changed since then, since my dad, but of course, my mindset was still stuck there. In fact, obviously, in here, US was a new country, but my mindset was still stuck there. So that's the prison that I created. I said, that's I can't be that, right? So, so Charles, what would you say to somebody who is kind of creating that for themselves? Like, oh yeah, but I'm not a techie. I'm not IT. I don't have that background. I don't have a data science degree. Should I go get a data science degree? Should I start learning about databases? Who do you think is in a better position to help business with business intelligence? Is it the techies? Or is it somebody who's not a techie, who is on the business side?
Trick question,
Yeah.
Avi.
Little
I
bit
think
of
I
a
know the answer
leading
to this one.
question too, right?
Great way to lead into it. So,
Yeah.
I'm an electrical engineer. So, I studied I studied electromagnetic waves and stuff. Nothing to do with data,
Yeah.
lookup tables, and then so I did that, and then I went to get my MBA. And I mean, I'm going to tell the audience right here, I almost dropped out of MBA school because to go from electrons to finance and accounting and all this stuff, it was totally new. And I mean, talk about stress. I was stressed out when I was doing my MBA, right? I was like, this is not for me. I want to go back to my comfort zone. I think this ties into your identity thing too, because in my head, I was an engineer. I knew
Yeah.
how to do the calculus, the math, but here was this financial depreciation, investments, loan, all this stuff that made very little sense to me. So I wanted to give up there too. But I finished it, and then what's fascinating about business is and I think you've taught me this is Power BI is bridging the gap. So you can come from the IT background, but I think you have an advantage now if you get into Power BI and you understand the why of the data, the who, what, when, where, why, and the processes behind the scenes. I think you were
Yeah.
the one that it's all about the process. So I think you almost have an advantage if you have kind of the data translating skills. Like, what is this data really trying to say? How do we make an impact from this data? So I was scared too. I admit, a year ago, I had major fears. Looking at some of these videos online of these complex 15 line DAX equations,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Those still scare me.
yeah. I was like, how am I
Like
going
what?
to do
What is
this?
that?
Yeah. But I think the big difference with your program too is there's really 20% that makes up the fundamentals of Power BI. And so I remember I went to the Power BI conference, and that's the question I asked everybody: what's the 20% I have to learn to get this?
Yeah.
And I remember Gilbert at Formu told me, he's like, Charles, it's the data model. If you can do star schema
Yeah.
and you can break it out,
Yeah.
then that is the secret. If you can unflatten or flatten down to a star schema, he's like,
Yeah.
then your DAX becomes super easy. And I started taking your programs, and I heard the same thing. You like
Hmm.
20%. Here's the 20%. Focus on this, and the rest of it will be easy, right? So I really had to focus down and really kind of bridge that gap of the 20% to make it easy.
Yeah.
So that's how I overcame that fear of the technical ability. Was I started asking people who had taken the journey before me, what do I
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. That's awesome. Boy, I'm standing at a crossroads here. So really quickly, let's talk about mindset, folks, and so often we have a mindset, we have a belief, but the challenge is that to us it doesn't look like a belief. If you take me back, if you ask me, oh, Avi, you believe that you're from a service family, so you cannot be a business owner or start a business, and I would say, no, that's not a belief. That's true, right? I mean, look at those guys, right? So we don't think of that as belief. Yeah, watch out for that, right? I mean, because you can kind of trap yourself there. Um, so t- so thanks, Charles. That was amazing, man. I mean, of course, and we have all seen different versions of that story in our group, and sometimes I not to like throw the IT guys under the bus. Well, actually, I am going to throw them under the bus, but I'm going to say, what have the techies given us? Man, they've given us it's kind of a disaster, right? And so what I saw in the organizations that I worked with was that business intelligence was locked away in this ivory tower, right? Sitting down with all these techies we talk about and you apparently admire, whom you want to be like. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not an IT, I'm not a techie, I'm not a database guy, I'm not a machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all of these things, data scientist. They were sitting in the ivory tower and locked away the business intelligence. And here I was, a business user, going to them with a begging bowl, saying, "Hey, can I have this report, please?" And they'll say, "Oh, we'll come back in 3 months. It's on our queue, and maybe you'll make the cut, maybe it wouldn't." So that's what techies gave us. Do you really want to be that? No, you don't. And of course, Charles is right. I mean, you come with an advantage if you're a business user. So that is the old world. That's what we're trying to bring down and demolish and build something new. And if you ask me, business intelligence belongs to the business. Those are the ones on the front lines. And the reality was, business frankly couldn't stop. Like if you tell me that, oh, you can only have a report in 3 months, well, I'm not going to stop running my business and wait for you. I mean, you have to make the decision, do something, but now you're doing it without any support, right? I mean, you can't base it on data, and you can't even test the results. You can't even make the change and say, did it work, and all of that stuff, right? So I really feel well, Charles and I are definitely on the same page here. I think business coming from a business side is an advantage, not a disadvantage. Cool. Let's move on to the next thing, which is so cool. Maybe business coming from business is an advantage, but how would I know that my Power BI skills are good enough? When did you know, Charles?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really when you dig deep and say, I think it was just when you decide that you're willing to do what it takes to solve the client's problems. And
Yeah.
I think I told you at the beginning of the show, I wasn't ready, but I just made a decision to sign up my first client. And
Yeah.
I told you this story. It's like I fear of failing, of disappointing that customer drove me like crazy. I remember working
Ouch.
late nights. I remember telling the family, it's like, I gotta figure this out, this star schema, this.
Yeah.
And I remember working weekends, and I just wanted to do the best job for that first client. And I think it was to help them. I didn't want to disappoint them, but it was for me, I didn't
Whew.
want to fail. I didn't,
Yeah.
so it was kind of weird. But once I made that decision, that jump, I wanted to
Yeah.
sign that first customer on to prove to myself that I could do it. Right. And I
Yeah.
learned so much from that first client. So yeah,
Yeah. Wow. That's deep. So we're gonna save the last one. That's a big
yeah,
can of worms, guys. Like the fear of disappointing your clients, right? The fear of
yeah.
failing, letting them down. It's palpable. Yeah. It's a strong one. But yeah, if we stay with Power BI, it's a little bit of a
Yeah.
catch 22, right? That I feel so. We talked about the 20%, and folks, I believe in the 20% core concepts. But the thing is, that's just theory. You can't learn. You don't really learn it from like a course, from watching my course. It'll wash over you, but you can only internalize it when you start applying it. And
Yeah,
and you've
that's a
heard
good point.
me say this, right? If you want to be really good at Power BI, you need real practice, and that requires two things. One is real data. So unfortunately, the course, AdventureWorks can tell. So yeah, that's BS. That's not real data. Real data is messy data. It's never as clean as that, right? So we just use it to show the theory and kind of it's a teaching instrument. That's what it is. So to get really good at Power BI, you need real practice. Real practice needs real data and a real client. And I see people like who lock themselves in these dark rooms and they're downloading data from different places and creating these pieces of art. You know, I don't know what that is. That is definitely not BI. because BI never works that way. BI is like a tennis match, right? And here these guys are just hitting the ball against the wall, and that'll make you really good at hitting the ball against the wall, but you're not learning tennis. Sorry, to break it to you. And yeah, so you need that, but of course that's where there's a catch 22. You need kind of that real experience, but uh, yeah, I mean, you don't feel ready. So Charles, I mean, I love the
Yeah.
part of your story where you essentially went all out inside your company. And I know there were some challenges
Oh yeah.
there, but you went all out there. And man, that I think was your proving ground. Tell me
Yeah.
more about that. Tell me about that
Um,
experience. I mean, how that
yeah.
kind of led you to, yeah.
So yeah, I started with my own department. At the time it was project management, and I built a BI report. And I remember, this fear is very real. Are my skills, my technical Power BI skills, good enough? And I remember binge watching your shows, Learn Power BI, and I think I watched each video like 3 times, and then I read your book, I think like 5 times. I just read it through, read it through, read it through. But I think what I was trying to do there was just put in my memory, each
Yeah.
skill set, and then I was going to refer back to it. But I wanted to know that they were there, right? So, but then I
Yeah.
was able to successfully build for one department. But then one of my small business advisors was like, "Well, do you have any proof that anybody would ever want this,
Mm-hmm.
Charles?" And I was like, "Whoa, this is scary. I got to go outside and talk to clients, and what if they reject me?" So I was like, "Well, this is kind of interesting. I'm in a company. There's a lot of departments that are siloed. I have a perfect example within the company now to show them. It's like, hey, look at this report. What if you give me your data and I'll see what I can do?" So I went to marketing. They wanted the reports. They saw what I did. I went to the accounts receivable, the finance team. I analyzed their data. They liked what I did. And it just kept growing,
Yeah.
and everybody wanted their database analyzed. And then I started, the engineering department. And then I started connecting all of these together and built this like fantastic 5 databases were feeding into this one dashboard, right? It was just the most fun I've ever had.
Yeah.
And that was my proving ground. Like you said, that gave me the data to practice on. And it was so good. I got to tell this story. So I had 2 interns, and they worked on this, massive reporting with me, with connecting all these databases. And they both came to me afterwards and said, that is the best internship I've ever had, because I could see my work making such an impact. Like the
Yeah.
people that I talked to in each department were
Mm-hmm.
so glad we were helping them and providing these insights to them, that it was just, that built, you're right. That was probably the moment
Yeah.
where my confidence just took off. It's like, wow, this
Yeah.
is really life changing. Like this is
Whoa.
company changing type stuff.
Man.
Yeah.
Dude, that is awesome. So, folks, we're going to get a little bit deep here. But, of course, so we were starting out with identity, right? Who are we being? So we focus so much on action, what we are doing, but the doing wouldn't carry any meaning. It wouldn't work if you're not being the person you need to be. And of course, we talked about initially the mindset where I was like, oh, I can't be an entrepreneur. And so I love the agile approach. Of course, I first tried it out with Power BI, and I saw these hundreds of millions or billion-dollar projects, and which would last years and would amount to nothing, right? I mean, they would be complete disasters. So of course, I'm like, no, that's not how I'm going to do BI. I'm going to do these short sprints. Now, since then, I have gone a little bit beyond, and I've used Agile in other places, like in fitness. I use Agile for running or vacations. That's a fun story. I'll save it for later. But then I started working with this identity, and I think the same principle applies. And I don't frankly understand. I'm like, how far does it go? Does Agile apply to everything? I don't know. But what I've seen about identity is that, so imagine some identity of a person who is obese, who's not fit, right? And the thing is that if you snap your fingers and change their identity into a fit man, so the thought experiment is imagine 2 people, one who's obese, one who's really muscular and fit, right? And imagine you swap their consciousness or soul or whatever, right? So now their consciousness is swapped. What do you think is going to happen to these people's health, right? This person, with this soul now has this fit body. Is it going to stay fit? What is this person who was obese but now has this new consciousness? Are they going to get healthier? Now you know the answer to that, right? So our identity is key, but how do we change that? I mean, we can't snap our fingers and change it. And I feel agile is the way to go. right? You got to take micro action to make a micro change in your identity, right? I mean, you help one person in your company. So Charles starts with the department, small action, right? He can do that. He controls that sphere, and once he does that, his identity changes just a little bit. Just he still has those fears and doubts, but he has just that little bit more confidence to reach out to another department, and another, and another, and of course, one day he has the confidence to say, you know what, I'm ready to take on my first client. So guys, yeah, I mean, don't so I go hiking, of course, and man, sometimes I feel like on some hikes I can see the top of the mountain. And Charles, that's one of the hardest hikes because you keep looking at the damn thing and it's not getting closer. I've been hiking for a bloody hour. And that's what we end up doing. So I love the hikes where I can't see with the top. I'm just focused on my next step, and before I know it, I'm there, right? So yeah, so it's kind of funny, right? So I talk about this concept of duality, where something is true and not true at the same time, or where two opposite things are true. So there's one quote that I love, which is by Paul Coelho, and he's a great author. Yeah, he's amazing, and he has this quote, and it says that the clearer your vision is of what you seek, the closer you are to it. And that's such a beautiful quote, and it's true, but it's also not true, right? It's the duality, because sometimes, man, it helps to be fuzzy. It helps to be fuzzy because then you can just focus on the next step. And I like things being fuzzy because I can fill in the colors as I go along, and I can really make it my journey. So, man, I mean, Charles, that was pretty awesome. So, um, man, thanks for sharing that. So, what was I going to say here? So, so what do you think about? And I don't know if it touches on the client thing. Maybe we'll cover that in the client thing. So let's move on. And so the next thing that I get is that, oh, Avi, but what about the rest of the stuff? Like, I don't know PowerFlow, I don't know Automate, I don't know Azure, Python. And of course, sometimes the quick answer that I give is, yeah, dude, I don't know those things either. Like, look at, like, that doesn't stop me about the businesses. But yeah, what's been your take on that? And yeah, tell me about that.
It's a choose your own adventure. All of this is new.
Ooh, love that.
That's what I love about it. Is if I think you do this all the time, and I kind of watch you and feed off of this because you can try something out, and if it doesn't work, you can always back up. And I've made Power BI my core, and I slowly
Yeah,
dabble in other stuff if I
yeah.
feel interested in it, if I see a
Oh
future in it.
yeah,
If not, I like try it out and back up if I feel it's not quite the right time. So one example is Power Apps, and I still kind of watch it in general,
mm-hmm.
but I tried it out, and at the time it was a little not as mature as I wanted it to be. Like Power
Yeah,
BI had reached a point where I was like, oh, this is easy, this makes sense. You build a data model, go. But I watched a bunch of videos and I binge watched, and I was starting to take this track down Power Apps, and I was like, this doesn't feel as comfortable as it should be, and I don't see the vision here. It's a little fuzzier. So I
yeah,
just backed into Power BI. So
yeah,
it's almost along the lines of niching, and you can start dabbling in other areas, kind of like MVP and trying things out. And
yeah.
I think, you've seen me, I tried out renewable energies, and I loved it so much, and clients were lining up
Wow.
and so I was like, so this is an area that I can combine with data, and I'm passionate about both. And I decided to shoot down that direction. So
Whoa. So dude, that has, well, maybe little to do with what we're talking about here, but I'm so
yeah,
excited. So Charles, yeah, I know you were at a solar farm with your
yeah.
son, visiting one of the clients, and you posted that photo, and I was like, man, this is like fate, destiny, because of course the name of your company is Solismatica, Solis coming from sun.
Yeah.
Um, so that is happening. Huh? I mean, that seems
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
great focus.
And I just talked to, I have an intern now, and we were just talking. It's like, let's rebrand my LinkedIn page, my
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
website. Let's put
Oh
solar
god, yeah.
panels, wind energy, and
Oh,
let's
love
just
it, love
change
it,
the
love it,
message. That, yeah, it's going to be
love
so
it.
fun.
So, folks,
It's,
yeah, I mean, you probably heard it. I talk about it all the time. So, in the program that we run for Power BI consultants, we have a simple 5 step approach. And the first step is defining your focus and niche. Now, of course, what we also talk about in there is that defining a focus and niche is sometimes a bit of a journey. And of course, I'm still on that journey, and I've enjoyed that journey. So yeah, I mean, you can feel anxiety. Say, oh gosh, I don't have my niche button down. Or I mean, you can clearly see the kind of the smile on Charles' face that he's kind of enjoying that process. But man, I'm happy for you. So I definitely like the phrase you use, choose your adventure. And I think that's the important part, guys. And one thing that I want to talk about quickly is what I call the learning paradox. And it's something so obvious, but people don't get it. And the learning paradox is the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, right? The more you realize that, that's I need to learn all of that, right? So the more you learn, the more you don't know. So you go to a horizon and then you see the land beyond. That's like, oh wow, right? Yeah, I mean, maybe you're kind of starting out and looking at me as like, oh, Avi knows so much, but of course I'm sitting here where I am, and from my viewpoint, it's like, oh, there's so much stuff that I don't know, and I'm looking at somebody else, and of course they are looking beyond that. So you can always be caught in that, right? So if you focus on that, I say, oh yeah, I got to learn all of these things. Guess what? You're never gonna make it. And of course, what I always say is that if you can't beat that game, you got to change the game. And I feel like one way to change this game, which you can't win, which is going to keep you stuck forever, is to take this bloody focus off from you, me, all about me. Am I good enough? Do I know enough? To somebody else. And I love thinking about that one person. Don't think about a demographic, target audience, any of that. Think about one person. And I ask myself, is there one person out there that I can help? If there is, man, bloody hell, I'm going to find that person and help them. That's my goal. That's my goal. Um,
Yeah, I just want to add, your pyramid video, I think really clued me into
yeah,
that line of reasoning. I was thinking too much of myself. It's like, do I
yeah,
learn enough? Is it about me? And when I thought about there's so many people that I can help that haven't studied, they haven't read your book, that haven't binge
I
watched the
know.
videos. And then that was that first client, right? That I worked with that first client. And after a week, I was like, oh, I'm actually contributing value to this person.
Yeah,
And here's an interesting story. So about 2 weeks later, this client gave me their PBIX model. It's like, Charles, I've already built a PBIX model, but I was afraid to show you this because I'm embarrassed.
yeah.
Maybe my data model isn't great, right? So there's fear on both sides, which was interesting to me, but to think about it as helping somebody
That's
else,
funny.
and you got that pyramid and you're helping somebody, that
Yeah.
changed my whole mindset and
Oh,
thinking.
dude, that fear thing. We're gonna definitely come back to that. That is awesome. So, folks, the pyramid video that Charles is talking about, I recorded that this morning just before the session. I wanted to post it on LinkedIn, didn't get a chance. So that's going to be coming hopefully right after this. And if you don't follow me on LinkedIn, make sure you do because you don't want to miss the pyramid theory. And yeah, so I'll be posting that there. And what Charles is saying is right. Even if you I'll say two things. One, even if you just discovered Power BI yesterday, well, today you can help one person who hasn't discovered Power BI and go help them, right? And right, so no matter where you are on the pyramid, you can always help the people who are just a few steps behind you. Um, oh gosh, what was the other thing that I was going to say? Um, Oh well, we'll come back to it. Another thing that I wrote down, and this one I did write down, so I forget, was Charles was talking about kind of how he keeps Power BI as his main strength, and I have this idea which I call the Thor hammer. So I feel like in your career, in your professional identity, so of course there's the business niche, but in kind of the technical tool set in your arsenal, you're gonna have a lot of tools, right? And of course, all of us, I mean, we have, we do Excel and we do this and we do that. I mean, right? I mean, we have all of those skills with us, but I have one Thor hammer. For me, that's Power BI. Boy, right? And that's my Thor. Man, I hit hard with that. I can pack a punch with it. And I think you gotta have that. You gotta have this core thing. Now, sometimes I need to do like a SQL stuff or I need to do something else. And if it's within my range, I can get it done. And of course, this ties in a little bit to that fear of disappointing a client and so forth. So, of course, there are areas which I can't step into, like Power Apps, yeah, I'm a beginner, right? I mean, PowerFlow, a lot of these things, Python, machine learning, I don't know anything about them. Azure, Active Directory, all of that stuff. Yeah, I don't even know much about Teams. So there's so much that I don't know. And again, going back to the learning paradox. So, of course, what we have kind of built in our pro community is what I feel is like the freelancing 2.0. I think initially when all this is Upwork and all that stuff started, freelancing, the vision at least that I got, and I'd seen what people were seeking was that, you know, imagining themselves alone at the beach with a laptop, right, with a drink in their hand or something and just working away, right?
Mm.
But I don't think that's what we want. Frankly, we don't want to be alone. Right? I mean, we want our freedom, but we don't want to be alone, right? We want to be independent, but we don't want to be alone. And of course, that's the duality thing that I talked about, which is both true, and I think they can be true at the same time. So, of course, in our community, man, we have people with different strengths, right? I mean, Ian Bowman, man, he's so focused on like project management and stuff like that. He's stepping into teams in a big way. And of course, different people have different skills in different areas of focus. And that gives me a lot of confidence because I can step into something, and if it's too big for me to handle, I can reach out to my network. So, of course, I can operate as an independent consultant, but I'm not on my own. Yeah, I think that's been a huge kind of a, yeah, it feels like, somebody's got my back. That's been really cool for me.
Yeah,
Oh,
just one quick
yeah.
thought. You mentioned freedom, kind of choose your adventure. That really drove me to kind of choose this path, right? But I remember how scary it was, going out on my own and starting being a Power BI consultant.
Yeah.
It's not when you look at, okay, everything was defined before 8 to 5. Here's the
Yeah.
time and what you do, and then you're like, okay, a
I
week
know.
from now, I'm going to have a freedom to choose my identity. I can niche down into whatever I want.
Yeah.
And this duality thing too is like, I'm going to reinvent my identity on YouTube and online. And, my neighbors, I still hear this. It's like, what do you do? There's like this whole community out there that knows me as a different person than I am online, right?
Yeah.
As a Power BI consultant. So, but that now I've learned to embrace it. I have so much fun because that's kind of my why is I wanted that freedom. I
Yeah.
wanted that ability to choose my identity, to choose what I do with my time. And that really drove me. If I
Yeah.
didn't understand that I don't think I would have made the jump. But that's a
Yeah.
big part of this decision is, but there is a fear involved with making that jump because you do have to make
Yeah.
your own decisions.
Man, you're right, and of course,
Yeah,
in some ways, I still kind of struggle with that. But of course, now with our community around us, that's a big help.
yeah,
But yeah, the
yeah,
thought that I mean, everything was kind of prescribed, and of course, that's the thing that I'm glad to have gotten away from. That I felt like I was in the back seat of the car, right, being driven around, and I didn't have any control. But now I had control. But again, I had the steering wheel in my hands. But man, there were some white knuckle moments, right? Because I'm like, man, I could crash the car. Like, I mean, earlier it's like, oh, these are the company goals, and you know how it filtered everything down. It's like, yeah, okay, then you write your own goals and you match them up with the company goals or something. This is how I'm contributing to the company goals. It was all very prescriptive, but now you get to choose your own goals. And of course, the
yeah,
biggest shift for me, so Charles, you and I have talked about it at length, right? Was when I was in the 9 to 5 job and the 9 to 5 mindset, opportunities were limited, right? I mean, I had to elbow my way and fight hard for that promotion, the bonus, because only one person was going to get it or something like that, right? And
yeah,
here, I realized that opportunities are unlimited, right? So it's like, it's
yeah,
such a shocking change. I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. Oh, why am I not doing this? And again, if I pick each one of them up, it's a brilliant thing. Why am I not doing this? But you
yeah.
can't operate that way. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna kill yourself, and I've had like some really tough times, so you got to stay focused, and yeah, having a community around that helps. Oh, actually, I remember the thought that I had earlier about knowing enough about Power BI. The fact is that most clients that I work with, the first thing that I show them, I mean, it usually has a simple power pattern of visualization that I use, and man, I usually just have two DAX formulas in there: sum and count rows,
Mhm.
and usually it blows them away. So I think yeah, I mean, don't underestimate that how little of Power BI can make a huge impact for a business that's stuck in the Stone Age, right? I mean, that's still doing, kind of Excel sheets everywhere and all that stuff.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think
yeah,
the calendar is one, the time intelligence. It's just simple year over year.
yeah,
You just tie a calendar to the date and then you throw in some year over
love it.
year type counts and percent, and people are blown away. It's like you did it that fast and you drag it.
Yeah,
That's the first one I typically start with because it just changes people's
exactly.
complete mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, folks, what Charles is talking about, I call it the shining beacon, and that's the project that I look for. I want to find that project, and that's what I want to work on with the client. So, of course, sometimes they come up with some idea, and I'm like, ooh, this doesn't fit the criteria that I have in mind. So, the shining beacon project, what I look for are three things. One is that it's something valuable that they really care about. Second is that it's really hard or impossible in their current world, which is often Excel, and but it's really easy in Power BI. Man, if I find these three, so for one, because it's easy in Power BI, like Charles said, time intelligence is like so easy in Power BI and so hard to do in the old world. So you
Mm.
got that combination right there. And often, usually, depending on what you're analyzing with time intelligence, it's often sales or something, so it is valuable to them. You find these three trifecta, you're gonna hit a home run every single time. You solve something like this and present it to them, inevitably the reactions would be like, whoa, how do you do that? And if there are like multiple departments in the meeting, inevitably, or they show it to other departments or in whatever their other staff meetings, people ask like, yeah, I mean, like, hey, can you do that for us? And it just gets so easy from here. All right, cool. Hey, so we covered a lot of ground here. Let's switch over to a last one. And man, talk about that fear. So, fear of disappointing my clients. So, maybe we covered kind of three areas. One was, so Avi, I get it. I'm not a techie. I'm a business user. I guess that's an advantage. It is. And I don't have to know everything in Power BI or all of the other tools, Powerflow, Automate. With the knowledge that I have, I can help the people who are on the pyramid just a few steps below me. But what if I disappoint my clients? What if I let them down? So I know, Charles, you talked about this fear, but I'm gonna put you in the spot. Did that happen? Did well, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
right? I mean, did was there an instance where you're like, oh shoot, I look at me, I disappointed my client, or maybe a milder version of that? Oh look, I wasn't able to solve this problem for them. Yeah, uh,
Well, multiple times actually. Now that I think back,
yeah,
especially at the beginning, I think it was I wasn't able to convey um, properly, and I learned. I think you have to learn from each one. You're going to fail multiple times, and I failed multiple times. And I think what
yeah,
happened, each time I was like, do I continue? I mean, this is not fun. This is not.
yeah.
So I mean, I had one. I did a lot of volunteer. I would reach out. It's like, just give me your data set. I'll just analyze it for you. And multiple times, I remember asking my friends, right? They had small businesses, and they kept saying, I don't see it, Charles. I don't see that. They have a Google sheet. I'd analyze it. And,
Yeah.
I disappointed them, and they didn't want to buy the product. They didn't see the need
Yeah.
in it. But I looked at those and I was like, well, the two people that I was talking to were really, really small companies, and they
Yeah.
don't have big data sets, and they could do it in Excel in a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes. I was like, maybe this doesn't make sense for Power BI, right? So,
Yeah.
so I did get rejected, and I did fail my customer multiple times. And I have another one. Oh, there was somebody I volunteered with a bigger data set, and the data. I remember there was a granularity issue in the calendar. By
Mm-hmm.
quarter, data was tagged by quarter, and I remember that's a really difficult thing for to explain and to when you have calendar one data sets at quarter, one's at dates, and you're trying to build these nested calendar. Very difficult to understand. People are like, why can't you work this out? Isn't
Mm.
this easy? I'm like, no, because they're that different grains.
Yeah.
So I had disappointed customers, but that taught me that that is a topic that is very difficult to understand, very difficult to match up,
Yeah.
and I could focus on that and improve it for the next client, right? So
Yeah.
I think this happens all the time, and I'm letting everybody in the audience know it's happened to me multiple times.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Boy. So guys, if your mind wasn't blown by that, is because you didn't get the subtext in there. Man, Charles, that was amazing. I didn't. Yeah. So, folks, the subtext there is, if you realize that so far we have been so focused on the tech skill discussion, right? I mean, we started off with, oh, I don't have the IT skills, the database skills, and da da da, I'm not a techie. And then we said, oh, I don't have the Power BI skills. Do I know DAX good enough and all that stuff? And then we said, oh, do I know PowerFlow, Power Automate? But Charles didn't really talk about any of that. In fact, his words, and I wrote that down, he used the word, I failed my clients, I wasn't able to convey. He's talking about communication. And notice that none of his failures were technical failures. Right? And I'm not saying that's not possible. It's possible, but we'll talk about that in a second. What if you can't solve a technical challenge? These were different challenges, and frankly, there was no way for Charles. If you stay stuck in that dungeon and say, "Oh, I don't know enough yet. I gotta learn more," you're not gonna have any of these experiences that Charles had. And of course, he used the word failure a lot of times, and he didn't. And he knows this, and I want you to know it, that failure is the best teacher. Look back. When I look back at my journey, and I look at my successes. Well, this is what happens when you're successful. He's like, yeah, clearly I was successful because I'm awesome. And there's no reason to change. There's no reason to change. There's no reason to improve anything, change anything, because you were successful. But man, failure is the best teacher. When I look back in the times that I've failed, man, it kind of shocks you. And like, you stop and you pause and you think, and that's when you learn. That's where you grow. So right, I mean, Charles did talk about kind of where he failed. I'm going to put that in quotes, disappointed his clients, right? But those were the lessons that he just had to go through that experience to pick up those lessons about communication, about targeting, all of that, right? I mean, maybe he was targeting the wrong clients, maybe he wasn't conveying the value the right way, and so forth. So, man, that was a brilliant story. Let's, I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is here we are. And again, we talked about taking the focus away from you, and it kind of stuck in our own feet. I was like, oh, I'm gonna disappoint them. I want to fail them, right? But Charlie, you talked about something crazy, which is like they're afraid too.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. This takes me back to like dating. We're both the boy and girl, like, oh, gosh, what's he gonna say? What's gonna turn out? And, oh God, just go and talk to each other, right?
Yeah.
go and talk to that girl. So. Therefore, tell me a little bit more about their fear. Have you seen this elsewhere? Have you seen it in different formats? What are the kind of things they're fearful of?
It's yeah. I see it all the time, and it's not always obvious. But about 50% of my clients get to a point where they will actually tell me, and it takes
Yeah.
about 2 or 3 weeks. But a lot of
Wow.
it is this fear of the technical ability, and a lot of times with Power BI, since it's free, right? They download it, they try it out, and then
Yeah.
they're like, I'm stuck. So then they reach out to me, and and this has happened about 4 or 5 times now, where
Yeah.
2 weeks later they're like, oh, here's my PBIX file, or here's my Excel file with my and then they show me their work later. But it's really really interesting because they'll hold that back because fear of being embarrassed. So they want to wait till they can trust that you're going to teach them, help them overcome those fears, and they won't convey that initially. So,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of this
Yeah.
back and forth until they trust you, and then they're like, oh, here's my
Yeah.
work. And
Yeah.
the most powerful part of that is when they give me their work, especially with M, because it's self-documenting. I can see their thinking process, and I can walk through, and I'm like, oh, here's where you
Yeah.
kind of did it
Love it.
wrong, and I can show you. but
Yeah.
but they hold this information back. It's really interesting that a lot of people hold fears until
Yeah.
they can trust you. Yeah.
Wow. So folks, yeah, and this is kind of the soft stuff. And I'm telling you, this is the real journey. And that's why, you can't lock yourself in a dark room and sit down with these books and watch videos and go to training. I mean, all of that is okay, but really you're not going to make any progress. You're not going to make any impact unless you put yourself out there, right? I mean, go out and help people. Uh, what was I going to say here? So I remember, Charles, you talking about something very specific, and we were talking about the initial call with the client, and you
Yeah.
said something which was so simple, but I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. and you said, well, the one of the main goals, maybe the main goal, is to make them feel comfortable, right?
Mhm.
Because they are coming in with fear and anxiety. Of course, kind of this thing where they're like, oh shoot, I mean, I try to do something and it's kind of ugly and we're not smart, right? So they have that stuff. And of course, they might have some anxiety about how things are going to turn out. Like, is this gonna work? Is Charles a good guy? Is it gonna start off good and then turn bad? I mean, maybe they've had some past bad experiences or something like that. The $1 billion, $1 million, whatever, those kind of projects that we talked about, where you put in a lot of money, time, effort, and then it amounts to nothing.
Yeah.
Um, are there specific things that you do to make the client feel comfortable on that very first call?
On a yeah, people are so visual, and I learned this from one of your videos too, and I tried it out, and it's amazing. But people want to know that you have a vision for them, a plan for them. So what I try to, I just
Mm.
listen to the problems. I do a lot of listening, and I try to
Ooh,
extract,
love it.
because there's that communication issue. They don't understand how to speak to you yet on the first call. Five
Yeah,
star schema. A lot of times these words don't. Ultimate
yeah.
calendar table. They're like, what is that? So they're trying to convey to you. You're trying to listen and get stuff out, and then so this is when the business skill comes in, because a lot of times you're talking to business people, not IT people.
Yeah.
So if you speak that language, you're like, all right, here's my vision. Is it sounds like the problem is you're struggling with this and it takes you too long to make decisions. So what I'm going to do is build out an MVP, and you'll see this report and it's going to refresh 5 times a day. So I build visually this map for them, and it puts a lot of people at ease, because then they can kind of visualize the plan, and that helps a lot, in terms of comforting them. And
Yeah.
this is just one thing. We were talking about all this, the quote failure things.
Yeah.
But every time it's like market feedback. Every time I have a client that's kind of disappointed, I
Yeah.
learn something, and then I find this now is problems repeat themselves. These, the calendar issues, the time, or the granularity issues, they
Yeah.
repeat themselves. So what really comforts people now is they say, Charles, this snowflake schema, this is so difficult, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh, I see this all the time. Or if this file's flat and I gotta build out the lookup tables. I was like, well, half of my files come in as flat files. So this
Yeah.
is not abnormal. You don't have a unique situation. I've seen
Yeah.
this. I'm confident I can solve it. And when you build out that market experience and you can convey that
Yeah.
confidently, they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm comfortable with you now. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, folks, yeah, it's kind of the again, and we've been talking about duality, and I think this is another one, which is I always say that you gotta focus, you gotta niche down, niche down, niche down. You gotta operate in a niche of a niche of a niche, right? So, and Charles shared that how he's kind of focusing on the renewable sector. You probably heard Greg's story, who's kind of focused on the coffee industry. Raul is focused on warehouse, and again, they're gonna get more specific. It's like what kind of warehouse, what kind of shipment, uh, what's the annual revenue, and who is the person that I'm talking to there. So getting specific is good, but what Charles is saying is also true, which is yeah, and I've worked with like different people in different industries. Of course, I'm in a little bit of a different role since I'm a teacher. I have students from all different industries, and Charles, at some point, it all starts to look alike, right? I mean, people come and they come to me as if the like problem is really unique. Like, I saw this online and I saw this video, but ours is different and we can't solve it because this is, like this is how we do it. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen that before. You're not the only one, right? So yeah,
yeah.
so that's also true. Um, cool, awesome. So hey, man, I definitely got a lot out of that discussion. Hopefully, for you folks did too. Let's see if we can take some Q&A. And folks, I would request you to just, if you posted it like 10 minutes ago, sorry, I would not be able to make that. So find that again. So Charles, you can scroll through as well, see if you find something
Okay.
interesting. And yeah, anything that which is closer to our topic. So Gord is saying, I'm about to quit my day job and become a BI consultant. Congratulations, it's a big step. I've been using Power BI since it was released. I'm both excited and scared. Good. There was no specific question there, but I don't know. Any thoughts, words for Gord?
I think words for Gordon. It's that fear is very real. All of us. I think everybody in the Pro Plus, all
Yeah.
the
Maybe
students.
talk about your
Yeah.
day when you, man, when you did leave a job. Boy, that was quite an
Oh,
emotional day for you, huh?
yeah. So yeah, I remember that day because I was sitting there. My heart was in my head, like I was feeling the pressure. I was like, tomorrow I am on my own. I am
Whew.
stepping off this, and I hope I flap and I fly. And I remember I texted you on Slack. I was like, Avi, I don't know if I can do this. And a second later, I look at my phone and it's you calling. So, and then you explain it, and and I think I poured it out. It's like, Avi, I'm doing this. I'm gonna fall flat on my face, and you're like, I think you say
Yeah.
you got this, man. We have all
Yeah.
been through this, and
Yeah.
just to have that group, that's what Pro Plus provided me, and that was just enough of a support group that I needed. And I also on the side, and here's a parallel to the story is my a lot of people around me were like, "What are you doing? Why are you quitting your job? What is going on? Why would you make this decision right now?"
Yeah.
But I remember I joined a group of startup people in town. There's a group that had a camp for startups, and I remember we had a meeting every Wednesday, and I walked into that room, and we went roundtable, and I got to me, and I said, all right, so and I expected the same reaction. This is the fear is I expected everybody was like, oh, that's scary. So I made the announcement. It's like I'm starting Monday. I'm
Yeah.
leaving the corporate world and I'm start my own job. And I looked down. I wasn't even looking up because everybody
Yeah.
else had been like, what are you doing? Right. And
Yeah.
I remember hearing applause, right?
Oh
People were clapping
man.
and cheering.
Woo.
And I was like, what is going on?
Wow.
Like it was like-minded people that were on that same journey and they were looking for somebody, and they wanted to support that person, right? And
Yeah.
that's the same thing with the Pro Plus family is I had these two families
Yeah.
of people pushing me on this journey. So I don't know who made that comment, but there are people out there that will support you on this journey. You just got to find them
Yeah.
and they'll help
Yeah.
you.
So, folks, the call that Charles is talking about, where I called him when he was on that day, on that fateful day, he definitely paid it forward. So, you called Greg when he was going through the same thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Greg and Frank is close
Oh
now.
God,
So
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, that's an
because
amazing
because
story.
you had helped me on that day, and I think back, that was so hard on me, and I want to be that person for other people. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
paying it forward, and this
Yeah.
reminds me of that marathon story too. I quit at mile 20, and this guy named Rob came behind me and said, "Charles, I'm in pain too, but we're gonna finish and run this together."
Yeah.
And you were that person for me when I was, making starting this journey, and Rob was on the marathon, and
Yeah.
so I want to help people because
Yeah.
I've been there. I've been in that point where like I was so full of fear. I didn't know if I could step forward, and you helped me step forward, and I hope to help other people. So,
Yeah. So, folks, yeah, I mean, as I was talking about kind of freelancing 2.0, I think this is better. Freelancing shouldn't be about you being out there on your own. Maybe you would have the freedom, but boy, yeah, I mean, I know I don't want that. I mean, I want my kind of freedom and independence in the sense of control. So I obviously control my hours. You control the time that you work, you control the people you work with, you control kind of where geographically you work with. So you have a lot of control, but I don't want to be alone. And man, again, I'm so thankful kind of for this community there. So great. So let's see. How to be a freelancer for Power BI step by step. So that one is easy. I'll take that one on. So we take our so folks who join our Power BI consultant program, we take them through a 5-step process. 5-step process, no secret. I'm going to give them to you right here. Step one is you got to define your focus and niche. Can't go out there saying, "Ooh, I want to be a Power BI consultant." I just use that term because I don't know what else to use, right? I mean, right? So, but I don't want you to do that. So, define your focus and niche. And the step two is that you create a pillar stone story around it. Step three is you go leverage your target your focus and niche, leverage your pillar stone story to get your first paid client. Step four is you get your next paid client using the same approaches. Now, usually, step four is a huge milestone. And folks, the outer journey follows the inner journey. You cannot have outer breakthroughs without inner breakthroughs. So what I've seen happening is that step 4, people go through this inner shift, and that's the most critical. And the inner shift that they go through is, at that point, they say, whoa, Avi, look at me. I can help other people and I can be paid for it. I can help other people, I can be paid for it. Now, the truth of that is that I knew it from the day one, day zero. I mean, when they joined the program, I mean, I interviewed them, I talked to them, right? I have no doubt in their ability. I know for a fact that they can help people and they can get paid for it, but they don't know it yet. And I can tell it to them, but it will be meaningless, right? Because it's not about saying, listening, hearing, right? It's about believing. And usually I've seen that it takes sometimes, and again, we talked about the agile process, they take this micro action and step towards it, and then that shift occurs, and that changes everything, right? So they're at a point where they believe, it's like, whoa, I can help others, I can be paid for it. So all that's left is step 5, which is to take all of that we learned and you create a system to build a steady stream of clients. And if you thought you were done, you're not, because we often repeat again from step 1, as of course Charles has gone back and he's kind of redefining his niche, and so am I, and so are a few other people in our program, right? So you do that in an agile manner. So those are the 5 steps. Let's see. Robert is here helping out people. Great. Hey, Robert, good to have you on.
Yeah, I wanna helping people, and you get paid for it because you're providing such value. I want to reiterate that, because that's, I was scared of selling too, but selling to me is not really, it's not really sales anymore. It's really just
Yeah.
helping people, making connections, telling your story. And that kind of goes into your 5-step process. Is you build your story in your pillar stone, you tell people your story, then your story, they get convinced that you can help them, and then they end up paying for you, right? So sales kind of happens naturally when you tell your story and make connections. So
Yeah. So of course I love Eamon's definition. So he says sales is a transfer of emotion. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, and of course another line that I use is that, yeah, the best way to sell is not to sell.
yeah.
And yeah, so I just put myself out there, and I get excited about something, and yeah, it just transfers to the client. Awesome, folks. So yeah, let's wrap it up. Thank you for joining us. And hey, our pro program enrollment, the program for Power BI consultants who want to be on that journey, is opening in January 2021. We're super excited about it. And yeah, so go to learnpowerbi.com/pro to sign up for the waitlist. You will hear more from us as we get closer to that date. We'll see